morning, everybody. Morning. It's beautiful to be here. I'm a Brisbaneite, so therefore I enjoy supporting the growth of change management knowledge in Queensland, but also more generally. As the Queensland chapter lead for the Change Management Institute, one of the main things that we actually do is about supporting organisations and industry to actually, first of all, be aware of what change management actually is, but secondly, to actually promote the profession more generally. So recently also, the Change Management Institute released its very first change management body of knowledge as well. So I've put a flyer on your tables for the Change Management Institute, and that body of knowledge is now available through the CMI website. So, okay. Building change agility. What does that actually mean? Why is it something that we actually need to consider? The main reason that we need to consider this is because of this. Our context is changing. Our world is changing. Australia is changing. Our local communities are changing. And we're actually starting to see for the first time organisations being impacted by too much change. What some of these items actually relate to the fact that we are seeing rapid communications. We are seeing an increase in the efficiency dividend that are being expected from organisations. What we found post the global financial crisis is that many organisations were realising that they could no longer function in the way that they could function. Due to a natural disaster that's been occurring here within Queensland and natural disasters that have been occurring globally, it also pays attention to the fact that we need to be responding to change at the individual level and at the broader community level as well. What we're starting to see also is the need for the drive for staff to do more with less. Our organisations are under strain. So sadly, what we have is this context that is constantly changing. A number of the clients that I have sometimes feel a little bit beaten around the head. They feel a little bit, when will this actually stop? The old theories of change management, which used to indicate that there would be a moment of freezing. One of the models, freeze, unfreeze, refreeze. Those models aren't as prominent anymore because now we are needing to be agile. We are needing to cope. We are needing to build our ability to manage and deal with these changes throughout our organisations and throughout our broader communities. What we're finding is our ability to change within organisations without and a concerted effort is not changing. What we're seeing, as per this diagram, is that the demand for change is increasing. One organisation that I worked within were wondering why some of their basic minimum standard processes weren't working in the way that they originally had hoped for. One of the main reasons for that was because at the same time as one quite large IT-related change going on in the organisation, they were also doing a very large change to deal with the administrative structure of the organisation. Those two change initiatives weren't communicating with one another. So therefore what we saw was that people needed to behave quite differently, interact with something quite new from a software perspective. It was a replacement of a 10-year legacy system when the people who traditionally used to have those roles in that organisation were actually let go as part of an efficiency saving. So you can imagine some of the things that were starting to happen in that organisation, some of the cracks that were starting to appear, but also the cracks that the customer of that organisation was also starting to observe. So therefore, we are seeing the situation where the capacity for change at the moment in most organisations, without actually being alert to the fact we need to change our change agility of our staff, is actually not keeping up with the demand that we're actually facing. Are people seeing that generally in their organisations? Yeah. Change fatigue is one of the words that commonly gets thrown around. It just means that we're exhausted. We're tired, we've had lots of change, and certainly from a Queensland Government perspective, the last 18 months have been a fascinating case study, I guess, of looking at the resilience of people, but also an example of where change could have been managed perhaps a little bit differently to actually bring the benefits that this current government were actually looking to achieve. The stats start to speak for themselves. What I've listed up here are 3 internationally related case studies. It's a bit frightening when you actually have a look at some of these statistics, and I know Jo in her presentation, she'll be alluding to one of these as well, that we still, even after having a project management methodology that's been in place for probably over 40 years, the project management body of knowledge, which is the international standard for project management, we are still seeing projects fail. Why? Why? We've got the tools, we've got training programs, we've got very experienced people, including, I imagine, quite a few experienced project managers in this room, but why are we actually still seeing that change? One of the main reasons is because we are focused too much on installation, not enough on implementation and embedding related activities. So therefore, the challenge for all of us is to try and find a balance between the project management related methodologies that we may use within our organisations and the focus on people, the change management related methodologies that ideally dovetail into those processes. If we do that, we're starting to see these sorts of statistics start to be raised. This group, the Change Learning Centre, is based in America, is linked to one of the methodologies that is quite well used across the world, which is called ProSci, which is one methodology in the change management space. And it's actually starting to demonstrate that it's a bit of the reverse. Rather than seeing, for example, 70% of projects not achieving their objectives and outcomes, what we're starting to see, if we do, and the key words here are having effective change management, not just a little bit of training, not a little bit of communication, but an effective level of change management related activity, we're starting to see better results. The benefits that we originally articulated within our business case for why we're actually changing our organisation are starting to actually be realised with the focus on people. So it's more than just a focus on the output or the product, the communication system. It is also a focus around the human behavioural related elements, because we need to ultimately change behaviour of people to actually get those benefits. We can't achieve the optimum benefits without people changing something in terms of their daily work life. We see this value gap appearing. And this is linking back to the fact our environment is changing, yes, but there are things that we can actually do about it. As I mentioned earlier, if organisations have a focus around installation, let's get that new piece of software in. Let's roll out that new series of radios for our staff. Let's start to actually reconfigure the organisation. We will actually see a greater return on investment if we actually also focus on that user adoption level, the implementation level, and planning with the end in mind. The very first question I usually ask myself when I'm faced with a new project is, what do I actually want to get out of this? Not just financially, but what do I actually see in terms of tangible behavioural shifts, cultural shifts within my organisation, within this cohort of staff? So therefore we start to actually build systems and tools and processes to implement those that consider ultimately what we're wanting to get out of this, rather than just something that's shiny and new and has different functionality. It's about the people as well. One organisation I worked within, we developed a change management methodology. That organisation had a reasonably robust maturity in project management. They'd been managing projects for some time, had quite reasonably well-trained staff, but they were still not getting the benefits that they actually were looking for. So one of the models that I developed for that business was an integrated model that saw a change management related method integrate with that. The key part of this diagram is basically noticing that the change management related thinking and activities start at the very beginning. I've just chosen for this model a Prince2 process, if you recognise some of that language, which is one of the methodologies that exist in a project management context. So therefore, right up in startup, when we're actually starting to justify what is this investment for, what is the business case around this piece of work, we started to subsume the change management related activities and discussions as part of that. So therefore what we found was that we actually costed change management related activities into the original business case, because we knew from practice, lessons learned, that if we didn't, that it would probably be a little bit of a piecemeal effort that used to happen sort of maybe down here. Oh gosh, we could better train these guys. Hey, we'll only need a couple of weeks to do that. Oh, what do you mean we have to communicate to these people throughout the process? Through this simple change, where we started to actually bring a set of modified tools and templates to sort of dovetail into a project management methodology, we started to actually see the change coming through. So in startup, who was going to be impacted? What was their attributes? What was the change between what their current behaviour is and what their future change is needing to be? What is their experience with change? Are they reasonably resilient, or are they people who will come kicking and screaming throughout the process, be quite resistant through the process? Depending on some of the answers to some of those initial questions, we actually modified our approach accordingly, had regular communication, we had regular events, we had regular familiarisation sessions. It was a communication that was two-way and also involved a network of change agents throughout the organisation. You can see the main model difference is at the end. Rather than just have the party when we launch the new software product or launch the new communications product, it's about actually making sure someone within the business remains to make sure that this process is implemented. Who is the person that people go to if there's a problem? What if people stop using it? I see this many times where the automated system that someone puts in is something where people may not use that. For example, in some organisations, we might actually see people reverting to their personal mobile devices rather than actually using the kit that's been provided for them. So how can we actually ensure that there's a group to make sure that these behavioural shifts, which do take time, start to actually flow through? And that might last 6 to 12 months once the project has actually been completed officially. So it's something worth considering. Change agility in organisations can be built, however, and I've done this in a number of organisations. The official definition of what change agility actually means that the Change Management Institute like to talk through in their body of knowledge is this one. So the ability to cope effectively with the discomfort of rapid change. That's what increasing change agility means. So it's quite a personal statement. It's a personal statement of how everyone within this room actually copes with the change that's going on in their environment and their organisation. However, there is also the need to build broader organisational change agility to be competitive. I was recently at the Change Management Institute Global Conference down in Sydney just a few weeks ago, and we heard from Todd Sampson. As some of you might have heard of Todd Sampson, he's connected to the Gruen transfer and a number of other products, did some great work, I think on ABC or SBS recently around brain plasticity and those sorts of concepts. But he was sort of suggesting that our ability to be agile, our ability to be creative, is our only last competitive advantage that we actually have. And for you in your various organisations, if we don't actually take this seriously and we expect that people can just get on and cope because they're strong or they're beefy blokes who are doing this sort of work on a day-to-day basis, for example, we've got it wrong. We actually need to change their ability so that they become more agile in how they change. They can cope better, productivity won't dip. Some of the attributes of what makes up someone who is change agile are these. What we start to see when someone has had some development in this space is that they actually have a high degree of resilience. It means that as changes are flowing through their lives or flowing through their organisations, that they have a better way of handling it personally. They have a better way of leading their staff through that change. We actually start to see more resilient teams. What we also start to see is comfort with ambiguity. It means that as changes are coming through, it means that that level of comfort with dealing and working within ambiguity actually also starts to rise. We also see people are becoming more personally aware. You know, emotional intelligence is one of the terms that people often use, but it's about being personally aware, not just of yourself as a leader in the organisation, but also being personally aware of how you react when changes come your way. And there are some hardwired responses that all of us have, but there are ways that we can actually learn to become more agile in that regard. We also are learning focused. We also have the ability to be incremental in our approach. So it means that the days of the large, big project that we'll just be focusing on and funding for 2 years are over. We're starting to see stages appear in projects. We're starting to see sprints appear in projects, depending on the project method used. Smaller, bite-sized pieces of change are usually more comfortable for people to actually move through. And finally, that we start to see comfort in stretch environments. What that means is that in organisations that are really trying to stretch the performance of their staff, people are thriving on that environment. They have targets that they can actually start to achieve. There are commonly 5 steps to build change agility in your organisation, and this is something that I could speak on for way more than just the few short minutes I have left. The 5 key steps are, first of all, respond to the needs of your organisation. What is the definition of change agility you would like to see in your staff? Where are they now? What are the needs and changes in your environment that are actually impacting on your organisation to basically be the business case for this work? Select or create a framework, and I've put one framework on your desks, which is one through Change First, which is one change management methodology, but ProSci is another change management methodology that can be adapted and morphed for your organisational context. But usually it's a good idea to choose some sort of framework or model to guide your change management ability. Develop a network, so the network of leaders, the network of change agents within your organisation, that some will need experience in planning for change, others will need experience in leading staff through change, others will need experience in personal change resilience related strategies. Develop up those staff through a range of mechanisms, and then review, repeat, review, develop. As you see changes coming through, keep the momentum going. It's more than just a one-off intervention. Building a culture of change agility in an organisation takes time. It could take a couple of years to actually do it well. I'll leave it at that point, but certainly would like to encourage you all to have a consideration about what your own personal change agility is in terms of the definition that we've talked about this morning. And then if there's areas you'd like to expand on, certainly there's questions for the panel very soon. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Elissa.